Torah study, which means every Yom Tov gives us spiritual strength. And the purpose of that is to go ahead and do the Avodah we need to do. It's like a person who eats food, takes things which are, this is my nutrition. The purpose is to be strong and healthy so I can live a healthy, productive life. So basically, Tishrei is in a sense a month that is a catalyst to push us forward to do all the things we need to do for the rest of the year. And that's what it means. Until Tishrei, we were absorbed in this bubble of a holy month, with holy days. And after Tishrei, Yaakov Halachodaki, that's when the journey begins. And there are many different analogies that are given to this. The most common one that's known, we're talking about from the Sichos, is, in Yiddish it's called a Yorid. In English it means a fair. People would travel to a business fair to do business. They would buy merchandise, wholesale, then they would bring it back home and sell it retail. So basically in the business fair, you go from one booth to another booth, from one manufacturer to another manufacturer, and you look for material that you can use and sell back home or sell it to people on the way going home. You accumulate and gather as much as you can, things that you can make money with, and then you go back. And that's when you unpack your packages, you unpack all the boxes, and you take them out, put them in the store, and you sell them to your customers. So basically, this is the analogy that's given, that Tishrei is the time we're at the fair, and we're gathering and collecting all the spiritual material that we need. And after Tishrei, that's when we go out into the road and we use everything that we've gained, and that's the main purpose. There's a possibility that someone should enjoy Tishrei, be absorbed in Tishrei, dance and sing and cry in Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, but that's about as far as it goes. It doesn't have any continuity. It's not something which I'm taking it along with me for the rest of the journey, and then I missed the point. But I would often tell the story that there was apparently a famous story that in Italy, when they had the first train, it was very exciting, and they were going to make a big display. Everyone should come and watch, and I guess thousands of people gathered to see. And the train started to move. You know, those days it was a sensation that there's a piece of metal that moves without horses. Normally, for something to move, you have the horses pulling it. And here's a wagon that drives by itself. So it was a big chiddush. And everybody's watching. And yes, the first train, the first car starts moving. Smoke is coming out. The whistle is whistling. But all the other cars are standing in their place. What happened? They forgot to connect all the cars to the front car. So Rabbi uses that as an analogy, that Tishrei is the locomotive that's pulling the whole train. And all the rest of the months, those are the other cars that are pulled along. So we have to make the connection. And when is that time? That's now. Right now, we're in that transition stage. We're in the transition stage where we just finished Tishrei. We haven't yet gone out into the world yet, because up until Shabbos, it's still part of Tishrei. After Shabbos starts a new part, so to speak, a new era. So until Shabbos, we're still in the Tishrei mode, but we're not 100% Tishrei because it's not Yom Tov anymore. But let's say halachically, we don't say Tachnun because we're still under the influence of Tishrei. So therefore, we don't say Tachnun. And the new stage, which would be considered the journey, actually begins the next month, the month of Cheshvan, which is going to be, this week we're benching the new month, and then starts the month of Cheshvan. And later we'll see that there's another stage, and that is in Cheshvan itself, the 7th day of Cheshvan. Why is that? Because the Gemara says, even though on Yom Tov we asked for rain, and we changed one part of the davening, there's another part we didn't change it. And that is in the middle of Shmon Esrei, there's also a part that you have to change to rain, the same Talamota. We don't do it now. When do we do it? So it depends. Those who live in Israel do it on the 7th day of Cheshvan. Those who live outside of Israel do it in December, the 5th or 6th of December. Why? So leave it up to the halacha teachers to explain that to you. But basically, the Gemara says why in Israel the 7th day of Cheshvan? Because when people left Eretz Yisrael, if they would get rain right away, then they would pray for rain right away. Look what happened to us. We prayed for rain on Shmini Atzeres. Sure, there's rain right away. It happened. Imagine they pray for rain and it's raining and all the people are traveling back home. It's very difficult to travel in the rain. It wasn't like today we had cars. Even today is difficult. But in those days, a horse and a wagon and roads that are not paved, traveling in the rain could be very complicated and very difficult. So therefore, they waited with davening for rain until they all got home. And then they prayed for rain. When did they get home? Zayin Cheshvan. Why? Because people traveled by foot. And even though I just mentioned horse and wagon, could be they had horse and wagon for, their belongings. They were on that, or older people maybe, or use that, or babies. But generally speaking, they actually walked, and that's why it took so long. So the Gemara says, until they came back home, they were still under the influence of Yerushalayim and the Beis Hamikdash. And once they got home, that's when it starts the journey. That's when we start doing the work. That's when we take all the energy we got in Tishrei and we put it to work. Rabbi, did you call him? Oh boy. So this comes in stages. Like in one way we can say this Shabbos is the beginning of the next stage. Another way we can say right after Simchas Torah is the beginning of the next stage. It's not Yom Tov anymore, that's true. But it's more of a next stage when it comes to Shabbos, and it's more of a next stage when it comes to Rosh Chodesh, Cheshvan, and it's more of a next stage when it comes to Zayin Cheshvan. So there are different stages. When is the Yaakov Halach, when we really begin that journey? When we say, okay, it's finally time to let go, step out of the bubble, and start to do the work that needs to be done. So it reminds me of the story with the previous Rebbe, that it was one Shavuos, and Shavuos is also a very big holiday. We received the Torah on Shavuos, and the Friedrich Rebbe's secretary came into the Friedrich Rebbe and started to talk about some things that they need to do. So the Friedrich Rebbe said, I'm sorry, I didn't come down from the mountain yet. Shavuos, you go on the mountain to receive the Torah. You didn't come down from the mountain yet. So there's a beautiful sikha from the Friedrich Rebbe, which no matter how many times I read it, how many times I learned it, it's still something very inspiring to read. And I'm going to give it over to you, at least briefly. It's based on this pasuk, so if you can give this out, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. This is a pasuk that we read in Shul on Shmini Atzeres. And the reason why, because when it happened on Shmini Atzeres. And that is that besides Tishrei being Tishrei, there's another thing, something very historic that happened in the month of Tishrei. And that is that on the 8th day of Tishrei, Shlomo Melech, for the first time in history, built the Beis Hamikdash. And the Beis Hamikdash is not just about the fact that it's a beautiful building and it was magnificent and very high and tall and it was something which is very impressive. It's more than that. It means that until that point, the Shekhinah didn't have such a permanent presence like it had once the Beis Hamikdash was built. So therefore, this was a historic day, and it was such a big simcha that they celebrated for 14 days. That was called Chanukas Habayis. That was the inauguration of the new Beis Hamikdash. And not only that, but I think you might remember we mentioned before Yom Tov that the simcha was so great that they actually danced and sang and celebrated and ate on Yom Kippur. And not only wasn't considered a sin, but they were all told, obviously, how could you do that? It's a violation. It's a very serious violation. Obviously, there was a prophecy that this is a rare situation and out of the ordinary, and it's okay. And not only that, they were told that whoever participated in the celebration and the eating and the feast will actually merit to have a share of the world to come. So it was a big celebration, and it lasted for the language is used in the Chumash, in the Tanakh, is for 7 days and 7 days. It's 14 days altogether, but it was 7 days until Sukkot, and then the 7 days of Sukkot. On the 8th day, that's when everybody went home. So you look at the bottom, and the top part, it describes a little bit the celebration. On the bottom, it says, Vayema Shmini, on the 7th day, Shlomo Melech sent the people away. He blessed them, and they all went back to their tents, joyfully, with glad hearts, for all the goodness that Hashem did for David, his servant, and for Israel, his people. The reason why it says for David, because Hashem told David to build the Beis HaMikdash. So he made all the plans, he did all the preparation, but Hashem said that you won't be building it, your son will actually build it. And interesting, the reason that was given was because he was involved in wars. And he had blood on his hands, even though this was something which he was commanded, and he had to do this to protect all the Yidden from the enemies, but it still was blood. Hashem wanted the Beis HaMikdash to be built by Shlomo, who was king in a time of total peace. So they left, and they were all excited, and they were all inspired, and they were all on a high, and they went back to their tents. So the previous Rebbe asks a question, their tents? Why their tents? It's known that Shlomo Melech's time in history was the best time ever for the Jewish people. In fact, the Gemara compares it to the full moon. We know that the moon gets bigger or smaller, but there's 1 day or 2 days that the moon's brightness is the fullest, and that's the 14th and the 15th. David HaMelech was the 14th generation from Avraham Avinu, and Shlomo HaMelech was the 50th generation from Avraham Avinu. And Shlomo HaMelech's generation was the brightest time in Jewish history. They had all good. There were no enemies. There was no wars. There was no fighting. The Gashmias, every Yid had whatever they needed. And in Tanakh, it actually describes the famous verse that's used, Ish tachas teinosei. Every person was able to sit peacefully under his date tree and under his vineyard, which means they had everything that they needed. So you can imagine that everybody had a home, and they had fields, and they had everything they needed. So when they go back home, they're going back to a tent. They're not in the desert. They're not traveling. Why a tent? That's the Friedrich Rebbe's question. And the answer that he gives is as follows. He says, in order to answer this question, I'll tell you a story. He told a story of the Baal Shem Tov, that this was the time when the Baal Shem Tov was the Rebbe, and there was one of the Chassidim, Baal Shem Tov was a very simple Jew. And he goes on a little bit to explain what that means. As we know that one of the things that happened in the times of Baal Shem Tov was that the simple Jews were rejected, and they were sort of alienated by the scholars and by the elite. There was a certain elitist mentality in those days. If you're a Torah scholar, if you know Torah and you're learned, you're part of society. And if you're not, you're worthless. To the extent that they actually had separate shuls, they weren't even allowed to walk into the shul of the scholars and the Torah scholars because you don't belong here, you're an ignoramus. So they were very downtrodden, they were very broken. And the Baal Shem Tov came and he lifted their spirits by basically teaching that every Yid has an neshama and all Yidden are equal, and people who don't have Torah knowledge but they're fear of God and they have love for Hashem and they're dedicated to Torah mitzvahs, then they're just as precious to Hashem like the great Torah scholars, and maybe even more precious because of their sincerity, because of their emes and so on. And many stories to bring that out. So this is one of those Jews Because as a result of that, there were thousands of people that came to the Baal Shem Tov. In fact, those who were opponents of the Baal Shem Tov used that to make fun of Chassidim and say, oh, Chassidus, that's for ignoramuses. But on the other hand, the Baal Shem Tov had all kinds of students. He had students who were brilliant Torah scholars, students who were not just brilliant Torah scholars, people that had Ruach HaKodesh, people that had Eliyahu Navi reveal himself to them on the highest of levels. And at the same time, he had simple Jews who were so simple they hardly knew the meaning of the words of davening, and some that could hardly even read the words of davening. And everyone found place and found their place and felt accepted and loved and part of the life of the community. So the Frierdiker Rebbe describes that the Alter Rebbe also attracted so many of these people, and they were Chassidim like all the other Chassidim, but in their own little style. And he gives an example. When a Chassid would go to the Rebbe, naturally the highlight of being by the Rebbe was the Maimer. In those days, it wasn't like today where the Rebbe would verbring for hours and hours. 6 hours for bringing, 7 hours for bringing. The Rebbe would come out, say a Maimer Chassidus. This sort of verbringing that we know took place, but in a different setting. It was usually in a private setting. The Rebbe and his family, his children, some of the older Chassidim, and they were privy to this kind of verbringing. But when it came to the public, it was mainly a Maimer Chassidus. And that was the new excitement, the new Maimer. There was a question, there was an answer, a new explanation to something the Chassidus really never knew before. And everybody was excited about it. When a Chassid came back home from Lubavitch, of course, everybody was excited. Here, someone just came from Lubavitch. Tell us what you heard, tell us what you saw. He would come together, and one of the things that he would do would sit down and review the Chassidus that he heard from the Rebbe during Yom Tov. I'm not sure if you know the niggin of the Madrichot, taught you the niggin, but there's a niggin that usually everyone sings this niggin during Elul and Tishrei time. It has strange words to it. It's Tikul B'Chaydesh Shefer, Tikul B'Chaydesh Shefer, B'Chaydesh Hashvi, Shuva Yisrael. There's no such pasuk. It's like a combination of three things that are totally separate. But what the meaning of the niggin is, these were Chassidim who came to the Mittel Rebbe, and they were passionate about the Chassidus that they heard. Now they're on the way home, and they met another group of Chassidim that were going to the Mittel Rebbe for the second half of the month, and they would say to them, it starts off with Russian words where they're saying to one another, so let me hear, what are you bringing back from Lubavitch? And they would say, these three Maimarim. One Maimar the Rebbe said for Rosh Hashanah, Tikka B'Chaydesh Shefer. Another Maimar that he said was B'Chaydesh Hashvi. And then he said a Maimar for Shabbos Shuvah. It starts with Shuvah Yisrael, and this is the merchandise that we're bringing from Lubavitch, and that was what they were excited about. So the Chassid would come home, they would go over the Maimarim, everybody would sit around, they would ask questions, they would discuss it. What did the simple Chassidim do? So we describe the Frierdiker Rebbe actually takes one Chassid. He doesn't mention his name, just gives the abbreviation of his first and last name, tells the story, the history of his grandfather. And then he says that this Chassid was one of these simple Chassidim that no matter how hard he tried, he just had very simple mind. No matter how hard he tried, he could not understand anything in depth, not in Chassidus, not in Nigla. He hardly learned a little bit of Mishnayos, a little bit of Chumash, and mainly they said Chumash and they said a lot of Tillim. The Alter Rebbe explained to them that just saying the words and saying it with passion is extremely positive and has a tremendous positive effect on a person. So when they went to hear the Maimer, they couldn't understand anything. But the excitement they had was when they heard the Rebbe say a pasuk that they were familiar with from Tillim or from Chumash. So he describes this chassid that he went to the Alter Rebbe, the Mittel Rebbe. When he came back home, he would gather together all his chevra, the simple chassidim. They all come together. He'd go to the next town. They all came together, and then he would start reviewing the Maimer. What did he review? He didn't know the Maimer. He would review the psukim. he would say that the Rebbe started with Precious Borei Elokim, and the Free Rebbe said that as soon as he said the words, his face became flaming red. Tears came down from his eyes. Then he said another pasuk that he said from Tillim, another pasuk was from Chumash, another pasuk from Tanakh, and he repeated the psukim, and that's all he said. And they were all excited, and he was excited because it wasn't about the academic part of it. He knew that this is all Gila Lakus. What he saw by the Rebbe was godliness being revealed, and he repeated those words that he heard coming out of the Rebbe's mouth. In fact, we're all talking about Hakel now. One of the things about Hakel, which is not in a mimer, it's actually in the Rambam. The Rambam says when you go to the Beis Hamikdash for Hakel, and the Melech, the king, will be reading from the Chumash, you should picture in your mind that this is Hashem's words coming out of his mouth. Even though he's a regular human being, and he's reading words that are already written in the Chumash, but right now in this setting, this is not an ordinary event. This is Hashem. You're hearing Hashem speaking just like you heard it at Har Sinai. So in the Beis Hamikdash, things were very different. And that's the way Chassidus felt about our Rebbe. So therefore, he was all excited and all emotional that he had the merit to hear Bereshis bara Elokim from the Rebbe's mouth and the next pasuk and the other pasuk. So this was the simple Jew that we're talking about that spent time by the Baal Shem Tov. He lived in a small village that wasn't far from Mezrich. So before the Baal Shem Tov said goodbye to him, before he's ready to leave, Baal Shem Tov said to him, I want you to stop by the city Mezrich, and you should give regards from me to one of my best students, one of the most strongest Chassidim connected to me, Rav HaTzadik HaGoyin HaKodesh VaHanoyer Radoy Ber. He was all excited. The Baal Shem Tov was giving him a personal shlichus, and he's going to meet somebody that had all these titles, which is amazing. So he comes to Mezrich, and he says to the people, there's supposed to be a very, very big tzaddik here, Goyin, and this and that. He used all the titles, Rabber. They didn't know who he was talking about. Nobody like that. How could it be? The Baal Shem Tov told me that he's here. We don't know anyone like it anyway. They went through different people in the town, and they realized he must be speaking of the man who teaches the little children. His name, he's the only one by that name, Dov Ber, and probably it's him. Okay. So he went to see this, the Maggid. Where did he live? So he lived at the end of the town, where most of the houses there were the broken down houses. And the whole area was like, almost you can call it like the slum area of the town. He walks to one of the houses, and he was shocked. When he walks in, he sees someone sitting on a block of wood. He's the teacher, obviously, and he's teaching children. The children are sitting on boards, and these boards are on top of other blocks of wood, so that makes it into a bench. And the table's also a board on top of blocks of wood, and that's the table. Yeah, he looked around and he sees such poverty in this home. He couldn't believe it. And when he told him that he wants to speak to him, he said that I'm teaching children now. I can't interrupt. Come back later in the evening and we'll talk then. Okay, he left. Came back later in the evening. And he told him he has Ravas Baal Shem Tov. Of course, Mezrich Maggid was very excited. And then he looks around and says, no, I'm really surprised. Like, when he came home at night, the bench wasn't there anymore and the table wasn't there anymore. What happened? All these boards turned into beds. That's where the kids were sleeping. And he said to him, like, I'm not a wealthy person, in any way, but I have furniture, I have a table, I have a chair, I have beds, I have a menorah, things that you need. But how do you live in such poverty? So he said to him, at home, you have it at home. At home is a different story. At home, you need to have all the furniture. That was his answer. And with this, the Frierdiker Rebbe answers the original question, which means when you're at home, you need to have all the furniture. When you're traveling, you have a tent, you don't have all this furniture in a tent because you're traveling. So the difference between a home and a tent is not just the physical thing. The difference is this is a permanent place where I live. This is a temporary thing. This is primary. This is something secondary. I'm traveling, so I have a tent, just something to protect me, but that's not where I really am. I'm really over there, not over here. So Mezritcher Magid was basically saying to him, this is not where my mind is at and where my heart is at. My mind and my heart is in davening and learning and ruch. He didn't say those words, but that's the connotation. And the gashmius and the physical, that is something which is, to me, is a tent, meaning it's secondary. And the Frierdiker Rebbe concludes and says like this: when Yidden went to the Beis Hamikdash, they were on a high, they were inspired. And again, the whole purpose of the inspiration is to take that inspiration and it should inspire you for the future, for the rest of the year. The main sort of thing they went home with is this understanding that gashmias, wealth, physical things that we accumulate, all this is the tent. Ruchnius and godliness, that's my home. That's where I really live. That's where my life is at. And naturally, when you have the right perspective on things, automatically you'll be doing the right things and not doing the wrong things. Then when it comes to davening and learning, you're not going to say, I have no time to daven, I have no time to learn because I have to make money. On the contrary, money to you is secondary and business is secondary. And davening and learning is your primary thing in life. So of course, that has priority over everything else. And it's not that I have to find a way to fit my davening and learning into my schedule. It's the other way around. My davening and learning is my main goal. And I'll find a way to all other things that they should fit into my schedule of davening and learning, or keeping Shabbos, or keeping kashrus, or keeping tznius. Those are the things that Hashem gave me, and that's my home. Everything else is basically secondary. So basically, when they came home from Beis Hamikdash, they saw godliness openly. Beis Hamikdash was a place where Hashem's presence was revealed. There were 10 miracles there on a daily basis. People were inspired. It was very hard even for them to leave. They were such a high. And the high was to recognize the emes, what really life is all about, what Hashem is all about, what am I here for, what am I meant to accomplish? And that inspiration that's what they took along with them when they left. And the same is with a chassid coming to a Rebbe. It's the same idea. That we come to a Rebbe and you observe Ish Elokim, a godly person, his davening, his learning, his akafis, his shofar, his lulav, his esrog, everything that he does. And even though, as we were staying right now, we didn't see all these things, but nevertheless, just being here and being in the place where we know that all these things took place, and not only took place, but they're still present, and this inspires us in a way that we walk away from here, we're uplifted, we're inspired, we recognize what's emes, or what my real goals in life should be. And that's what keeps us going. So this is an introduction to what I want to give out to you, this letter. It's a letter that the Rebbe sent to a certain chassid. If you don't mind to pass this around. There was an individual, his name was Zalman Yaffe. He was from England. And he merited to have a very special, close relationship with the Rebbe. Him and his family. So he wrote the Rebbe. After Yom Tov, he went back home. And he wrote the Rebbe that most of the people that came back to England from 770 came back with a cold. So if you want to read the bottom of the page, P.S. The following comes in English in response to your English letter, and particularly as it comes in reference to a remark that nearly everyone who was in New York during Sukkot returned with a cold.
It's so funny, there's so many people who have
sniffing. Okay, let's turn the page. I was, of course, taken aback by this development. While 770, especially in the crush of his Zman Simchas could cause some discomfort, had not expected, and it could be the cause of a widespread cold with a capital C. I'm used to receiving reports about returning from 770 filled with warmth, bursting with enthusiasm, energy. If it had any physical effect, no doubt it raised the body's temperature several degrees. But to return from here with a cold, granted that England's climate is on the cold side all year round, and that Englishmen are basically conservative, reserved, and cool-headed, not given to a display of exuberance and overreacting, I had thought that things had changed a bit in England in recent years. Of course, your statement implied no fault, certainly not intentionally. However, the association of a cold with 770 seemed quite something or other. Okay, if you say so. Especially as Lubavitch here, as well as the Manchester of Great Britain and elsewhere, with Hashem's help, succeeded in breaking the Ice Age. Be as it may, there are certainly no kpeda, no, I'm not, God forbid, upset at you, rather in the spirit of some pigeoness. There are a pigeon that one of the Rebbes wrote. He wrote, expressing prayer that I wish it should have an impact on me and on others. I pray that, as has been said, should have an impact on myself, that my conduct should leave no room for any possibility of a cold in others. Even though this person meant a cold physically, but the Rebbe's took it a little bit on a broader level and said that 770 being here for Tishrei, being by the Rebbe, is supposed to do the opposite. It's supposed to create a fire of passion, excitement, and that passion that should be lasting us all year until next year Tishrei. And I don't know if you remember the story I told you also before Yom Tov, the story about that soldier that was being flogged because they said, if you would remember the oath you gave to the king that you'll be dedicated to him, your feet never would have frozen, right? Okay, that's already a higher level to say that you should be on such a high and so hot that you don't get any colds. Obviously, the weather could be, very cold sometimes, but the Rebbe meant to bring out the point. And of course, when you write to a Rebbe, when you speak to a Rebbe, everything you say is very accurate and really makes an impact. So the Rebbe took the opportunity to make sure that Chas v'Shalom, a person shouldn't walk away from Tishrei and think, oh, feel bad, I went to 770, I was by the Rebbe, now I don't feel good. On the contrary, it's supposed to lift us, inspire us, and give us the strength to do the Yaakov HaChadak all year round the way it should be. Okay. So I think the message is clear. Now I got to get to work. Yeah.
When you were talking about the simple Hasidim that we go to that and we hear like the Rosh Hashanah. Basically, yesterday I was talking with someone, like an older woman, and I was like telling her about my Tishrei or whatever, how I learned 770, and she was telling me how when she was my age, when she was 770, she was like new to Chabad, and so she didn't really understand Yiddish. And like a lot of her friends, like they all came to Crown Heights and they didn't really speak Yiddish. But she said that when the Rebbe was her brain, they would like tie these like ropes or something, and they'd be hanging for hours. And she said, and we didn't understand a word he was saying. We just wanted to be there. And I was like,
inspired.
Wow.
That's exactly what it says.
And I was thinking about that because literally, like, she didn't know what he was saying, but she just wanted to be there.
Right.
And she was like, we would stand for like 10 hours, and we wouldn't understand a word. Sometimes we wouldn't even hear what he was saying. We wouldn't see him. She's like, but we were there, and it was like, wow.
Right, because you sense, the neshama sense, there's something here which is emes, something here which is so much higher and greater than me, and it's inspiration. Okay, so it should be a good start. By the way, this is the new schedule for after Yom Tov. The Yaakov HaChadak. You want to give this out? Thank you. Yes.
When you went through the Shemay and the first and there was like Raida Shiva, when it's like a minute to take on a hachlata after Tishrei. So do people try and take on a hachlata like specific to like the energy that they got like injected, like specifically with regard to Simcha, or specifically specifically with regard to Kabbalah's, or can your hafata be like
Anything,
anything?
right? The simcha, the Kabbalah said, this will be the fuel, the electricity
Right.
that will
But it
fuel
could be
it.
any hafata. It doesn't have to be like
Right,
kind of correlated
Right.
with disease like main ideas.
right. And also achlata, it's very important. Achlata shouldn't be anything too overwhelming.
Right.
Not a lot. And the main thing that makes achlata special is that it's something new. I'm doing something new that I haven't done before, even if it's not a lot, but it's new. I'm moving forward. And that's the quality of achlata. Okay. Never showed enough answer. The pity just says I could have had both of us together. Okay.
I was thinking when you're doing like a
Back.